Oh, the culture war of all culture wars. After 7 years of litigation, the trial has finally arrived. NASL has its day in court versus United States Soccer Federation and MLS in their antitrust lawsuit seeking $500 million in damages. I honestly can't believe it's actually here, but yeah, the court trial that might see the likes of Don Garber and other high-profile officials in American soccer go on the stand kicks off today, Jason.
Yeah, this is like you said. It's been a long time coming. We didn't. We were trying to dive into a timeline on this. I pulled up a couple of things. 2017, I believe, is when the actual suit was filed. 2017. That is long enough ago that I was not yet married to my wife at the time.
My children weren't in school.
And I just celebrated my 6th anniversary. So there you go, right? Like my child, who I think of as so central to my life, was not even a thought in my head, had not even conceived of the idea of conceiving a child with my wife. And here we are, just starting the trial. Obviously, this means the legal system is just, that's how it works, right? Filing and filing after filing after filing, and you got to deal with a judge who has to go through. Well, this, they're making this claim and that claim, and do you toss it out because of this, or does you reject that? And everybody's trying to get to a place of resolving this. There may have been a point. Right. And I remember covering this from the beginning. There may have been a point where US Soccer and MLS, who was pulled into this lawsuit by NASL, could have settled with Rocco Commisso, the main force behind this, the owner of the New York Cosmos, the guy who took over the Cosmos towards the end of the NASL 2.0 period, and believed that US Soccer and MLS were conspiring to hold back the competition that could be presented by NASL. There was a moment maybe when they could have settled with Rocco, but that ship sailed. And Rocco doesn't need the money. Rocco doesn't need the money.
Imagine how much he spent in 7 years of legal bills. I mean, my goodness.
Especially because they have Jeffrey Kessler as their lead attorney on this case, and he has a big name in sports litigation, right? This is a guy who has been involved in a number of cases. He may have been involved in Frazier versus MLS, if you go back and look, which is the original lawsuit challenging single entity for Major League Soccer. Just to kind of sketch this out and give a remedial description of what we've got here, Robert, this all comes down to, as I said, this is an antitrust case. This is a restraint of trade case. This is NASL and Rocco Commisso making the argument that U.S. Soccer put in place policies, or had in place policies, that did not allow the NASL to properly compete in the market in soccer, in professional soccer in the United States of America. Right? It comes down to professional league standards and the requirements that U.S. Soccer has in place in order to count as a first division soccer league or a second division soccer league, or whatever division level we are talking about here. I'm curious what you know about this case and what you make of it still, like the fact that we're just now at a trial. And I guess we're going to have to ask some legal professionals and experts what the potential fallout from this trial might be.
Well, the NASL is seeking about $500 million in damages. But yeah, like your point, I reviewed this. There's a really good Forbes article, and I know you noted another article with the timeline, and we should put a link in the description of the show or something like that. But it really all boils down to granting waivers for division sanctioning, and how MLS had received waivers almost unilaterally, blanket waivers, when they requested them, and NASL was not. And a big date on the timeline was last June of 2024, when a pretrial hearing, they noted that there was significant evidence that USSF and MLS had, worked in collaboration with NASL on the outside. So there's 4 main evidence points that led to this trial. One being MLS was always granted waivers to meet the D1 status, so they never 100% met those professional league standards to be a Division I league. And then two, USSF application of standards changed when NASL became a potential competitor. They added in 2009 when NASL 2.0 started, they all of a sudden invented a standards board. And then in 2015, when NASL applied to be a D1, they raised the standards, and then they didn't grant them in 2017, which was the death knell. Didn't grant them the second division standards either. The third point was the Sports United marketing. Remember that? It's not there anymore. Maybe because of
Right.
this trial. It was ruled as evidence that some bundling the Major League Soccer and the national team rights together was anti-competitive because it gave Major League Soccer an
Yes.
advantage that
Yes.
NASL couldn't possibly have if they weren't bundled with the national team stuff as well. And in the
Yeah.
fourth point, there's evidence that MLS had meaningful control of the USSF board.
Yes. And again, like some of this may feel wrong, right? Some of it is sort of just like if you're a soccer fan or just a rational human being, you go, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
That's not the way it's supposed to work. Whether it rises to, conspiracy and restraint of trade and will lead to a win for NASL is a very different question. And again, there's a lot of sort of legal stuff in here that is tough for us as civilians to parse and,
Yeah.
and try to determine how much it's going to impact whether or not NASL can win this. Remember, NASL just named a new commissioner, so I think they're trying to line up some things to make a case that they're going to play again. I think they shut down in 2018 because of basically a judge in this case said that the professional league standards still applied, and that if NASL didn't meet, because they asked for the waiver, they wanted to remain a Division II league, that was repealed or that was denied. Their request to remain a Division II league, that was denied. The court did not force US Soccer to continue to grant them that Division II status, which meant they shut down. Right? They didn't have the US Soccer backing to continue as a league. And because they haven't played, I think this all kind of feels like I don't know, it doesn't feel real in the sense that it doesn't feel like it's going to have major impacts on anything, but I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I think a lot of this comes back to the issue of, and I'm being very remedial here, very simple in terms of my understanding, because I don't understand a lot of the law stuff that, that has been filed and injunctions and all that. But in the sense that U.S. Soccer's power stems from the act that set up Olympic sport governing bodies, right? This is there is a, I'm trying to remember the name of the act. It's going to be, I think it's the Stevens Act. Is that that's the one, right? The Stevens Act created this kind of setup where you would have a gymnastics organization who would run American gymnastics. You would have a skating organization that would run American skating, right? These, and obviously lots of these have been in the news for various bad reasons in the recent past, right?
Yeah.
And obviously when you have a small number of people who are in power over an entire sport, or sort of how it's governed in a given country, that can create a lot of problems. Power is a corrupter, by its very nature, regardless of whether these people mean bad things in the beginning or not. The Ted Stevens Act, by the way, is what I'm talking about. I think there is a legitimate question as to whether or not soccer can be organized under this Ted Stevens Act, because while it is an Olympic sport, it sort of has this much bigger profile, much bigger possibility. So it is worth questioning whether U.S. Soccer, by the laws of our land, should be able to govern soccer in America the way that they do. Now, the obvious problem with that is that if you don't have an organization like U.S. Soccer in charge, like if you don't have somebody making decisions like this, well, then it's chaos. It's the Wild West. There's no organizing structure. Therefore, no one's. And so if NASL is saying, hey, you hurt us unfairly, illegally, by not granting us waivers or not allowing us to operate as a league, right? And in a capitalist free market system, we should be able to to operate, right? This is what antitrust law is all about. That one business or one company or one organization cannot control and monopolize an entire industry. We don't want that as Americans. But again, the counter catch-22 part of that is if you don't have standards, well, then what do we get? We get NISA, right? We get fly-by-night operations. We get clubs that can't pay their players. We get clubs that are playing in terrible situations. And then every single time that happens, every time a club comes and goes or a league club comes and goes because of poor governance, a lack of funding, or just charlatans and grifters are involved in soccer, the game suffers in America, right? We do damage to the reputation of soccer. We salt the ground in places where soccer should be growing. And I get frustrated with that, but I this is so circular a problem in America. I don't exactly know what it could be, because you can't argue that if Rocco wins, that's great for American soccer. Like, I just don't buy that argument, Rob. If Rocco wins, if NASL wins, it might be the right decision legally, but it can't be great for American soccer if that happens.
Well, regardless of the outcome, it sounds like some key players and some of the most guarded answerers of questions, like Don Garber and Sunil Gulati, who don't get pressed in public forums very often, will have to, answer these questions. And at the very least, folks who weren't quite sure what this whole sanctioning and this lawsuit was about will get some of that spelled out to them, and they'll have to answer some tough questions regardless. I mean, Kessler, like you said, he's a high-powered attorney. I don't think he's going to take this on. Granted, he's probably billed a lot and probably has made a good amount of money on it, but you wouldn't think that he would take this on if there wasn't some merit, or if he didn't think that there was some value in pursuing this case beyond monetary enrichment. And just a final note from the Forbes article, it says the burden is now on NASL to prove the existence of an agreement between US Soccer and MLS, which unreasonably restrained the market for professional soccer in the US. And then the reply, or the defense that MLS and USSF have gone to throughout this whole process is NASL's demise was the result of its own mismanagement and connection to criminal indictments.
Well, that's traffic and all of that stuff, and we can go back, and that's a lot to revisit and try to explain. Aaron Davidson and the whole thing, and TV rights being sold illegally and all that stuff, or graft and all, payments under the table and all. Okay, what I was going to say though is multiple things can be true at the same time.
Oh yeah,
and this is the story of American soccer. Multiple things can be true at the same time. That in the grand scheme of things, in the big picture, we have benefited from MLS.
Yep.
Benefited from single entity. Benefited from the largesse of billionaires and people who were willing to put money into a product they didn't know was ever going to return them value. Right? We can say that Gulati did a lot of good things for American soccer and helped grow U.S. soccer, because it was nothing in the 90s, in the early 90s and late 80s. It was nothing. There was nobody cared. There was no money. Nothing was happening. And Chuck Blazer's part of this too. As much as we have we hate Chuck Blazer for being corrupt, if Chuck Blazer didn't exist, it's a real question as to whether or not U.S. soccer would have grown the way that it did. Make a bid for the World Cup, do all the things that happened in those early days, in the late 80s and early 90s that allow us to get here. Now,
throw the big butt in there. Throw the big butt in there.
The big butt is that these people, because of the power that they wielded, they took advantage of that power. They acted in ways, and Sunil Gulati is absolutely guilty of this, and we 100% know Chuck Blazer is, and you can throw a number of names into this mix as well, and I'll let you have your pick, that those people made choices that benefited them or their organization that hurt the grand picture of soccer, at least according to certain people's view of what soccer is supposed to be. Right? Again, a game of the people, access, not closing off the leagues, not making it difficult to compete, like all those things. Right? Those things, in a perfect world, we would have a different setup. But it's worth questioning whether we would have ever even gotten to a place to be able to ask those questions and imagine that world if not for some pretty shady people doing some pretty shady things.
We shall see what the ramifications of this are. I mean, when you get large sums that are being pursued, like, do they negotiate it down? Like, if this is agreed to be antitrust with US Soccer and MLS, like, do they negotiate down that $200 million? But you said that, they've already had their chance to settle, so maybe they'll pursue that full thing. Maybe we'll have to, that question I want to ask, is there any possibility within this that either USSF has some sort of a punishment where they have to recuse themselves, or the leaders and like that are implicated here have to recuse themselves from?
What is the hold on? So there could be a monetary award here. And by the way, remember, just as a point of reference for how sometimes these things go, remember that the USFL sued NFL over a monopoly, right? Sued over basically along the same sort of legal lines. Do you remember what the award was for the USFL? $1. $1. They got the benefit of knowing they were legally right, but they basically got nothing out of the deal. And I don't know. I'm not a legal expert enough to know if that's going to happen in this situation, but it could very well end up being that the NASL wins on the merits of their case, which has been narrowed from their original filing, the original complaint. They could win and still nothing would fundamentally change. Nothing would be different. If you are a person who thinks we need to burn it all down because it's all rotten to the core and it's all terrible and we don't have pro rel or whatever it is, if that's your belief, then you want the NASL to win and you want it to mean problems, an end perhaps to the leadership of U.S. Soccer. But what does that world look like if U.S. Soccer is no longer in charge of governing professional soccer in America? What does that look like? And is it better? And I don't have the answer to that. I can't, that's a difficult future to imagine. But some people want it, Robert. Some people want it.
We shall see, but just day one of NASL versus MLS and USSF starts today. We shall see what happens. It's expected to take well over a week. We'll try to follow it along as the trial pushes forward. The culture war of all culture wars here on Morning Kick Round. And if you enjoy this segment, give us a subscribe. We are just a few subscribers away from the first goal of 500 subscribers. So be sure to click that subscribe button. Follow along on social media at mkickaround, or write us an email, morningkickaround